William Thompson brought down his gavel with practiced authority, the sound echoing through his courtroom. Before him stood Emma Jackson, her chin raised despite the exhaustion evident in her eyes. The courtroom was quiet as everyone waited for the judge's verdict. "Ms. Jackson, this court finds you guilty of contempt for your behavior during yesterday's proceedings. You are hereby fined £500, to be paid within 30 days. Emma nodded silently, gathering her well-worn leather bag. She had stood up during a case involving a young man from her neighborhood. The boy was facing harsh penalties for a minor offense, and Emma had spoken out about the unfair treatment. She hadn't expected fairness in this courthouse, not after seeing how the system had failed her community for years. "Your Honor," she said finally, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I will pay the fine. But I hope someday you'll understand why I couldn't stay quiet." The courtroom remained silent as Emma walked down the aisle. A few people nodded at her with respect. Others looked away, uncomfortable with the tension in the air. Judge Thompson watched her leave, feeling an unusual twinge of doubt. Something about her dignity made him wonder if he'd missed something important. After the day's proceedings ended, William sat in his chambers reviewing case files. His mind kept drifting back to the woman he had fined. There was something about her, a quiet strength that unsettled him. Most people who received fines were angry or apologetic. Emma Jackson had been neither. She had accepted his judgment with grace but without surrendering her conviction. William had been a judge for 15 years. He prided himself on being fair and following the letter of the law. He had worked his way up from humble beginnings, through law school and years as a solicitor before being appointed to the bench. He believed in the system. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best they had. As he drove home that evening, the grey London skies matched his mood. Traffic crawled along the wet streets, giving him too much time to think. He turned on the radio to distract himself. Next up, we'll be speaking with Emma Jackson, who has just returned from addressing the United Nations Human Rights Council on judicial reform in Western democracies. William nearly swerved into the next lane. He turned up the volume. Ms. Jackson has spent 20 years working with communities affected by systemic inequalities in the justice system. Her latest report on sentencing disparities has gained international attention. By the time William reached his modest home in Hampstead, he felt uneasy. He heated up leftover shepherd's pie and sat at his kitchen table with his laptop. He typed Emma Jackson's name into the search bar. Page after page of results appeared. Articles about her work with wrongfully convicted prisoners. Photos of her receiving awards. Videos of her speaking at universities and international forums. One headline caught his eye: "From personal tragedy to global advocacy, Emma Jackson's fight for justice." William clicked on the article and began reading. 20 years ago, Emma's brother had been wrongfully convicted of a crime he didn't commit. He had spent 8 years in prison before new evidence exonerated him. By then, his health had deteriorated due to inadequate medical care in prison. He died 6 months after his release. Instead of being destroyed by grief and anger, Emma had channeled her pain into purpose. She earned a law degree and dedicated her life to changing the system that had failed her brother. The woman William had found that morning wasn't just an ordinary citizen who had spoken out of turn. She was one of the most respected human rights advocates in the country. William pushed his plate away, his appetite gone. He thought about how quickly he had judged her, how easily he had silenced her with his gavel and his authority. For the first time in years, he questioned whether he was truly serving justice or just maintaining order. As the night grew darker outside his window, William made a decision. He would invite Emma Jackson to meet with him. Not to defend his actions, but to listen, truly listen, to what she had been trying to say in his courtroom. He didn't know it yet, but this decision would change not only his understanding of justice but the course of his life and the lives of countless others who would come before his bench in the years to come. The next morning, William woke early, his mind still filled with thoughts of Emma Jackson. He had stayed up late into the night, reading about her work and watching her speeches online. In one powerful talk, she had explained how her brother James had been wrongfully sent to prison for a robbery he didn't commit, all because he matched a vague description and couldn't afford a good lawyer. William dressed carefully, choosing his most approachable suit rather than his usual formal attire. Today he didn't want to hide behind his title and position. As he drove to the courthouse, he rehearsed what he might say to Emma if she agreed to meet him. The courthouse hallways were quiet when he arrived. William nodded to the security guards and made his way to his chambers. His assistant, Mary, greeted him with a surprised look. "You're in early today, Judge," she said, handing him his schedule. "Mary, I need you to do something for me," William said. "Could you please find contact information for Emma Jackson? She was in my courtroom yesterday." Mary looked puzzled but nodded. "Of course, sir." While waiting, William tried to focus on the day's cases, but his concentration kept slipping. An hour later, Mary knocked on his door with a phone number written on a slip of paper. "Thank you," William said, taking the paper. He waited until Mary left before picking up the phone. His hand trembled slightly as he dialed. After 3 rings, a woman's voice answered. "Hello? M.S. Jackson? This is Judge William Thompson. I wonder if you might have time to meet with me this week?" There was a pause. "May I ask what this is regarding?" William took a deep breath. "I believe I owe you an apology, and more importantly, I think I need to hear what you were trying to say yesterday." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm free tomorrow afternoon at 4. Thank you. Shall we meet at my chambers, or would you prefer somewhere else?" "The cafe across from the courthouse would be better, I think," Emma replied. William understood. His chambers represented the very system she was fighting against. "The cafe it is. Thank you for agreeing to meet me." The next day, William arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early. He chose a quiet corner table and ordered tea. At exactly 4 o'clock, Emma walked in. She wore a simple blue dress and carried the same worn leather bag. Her eyes showed surprise when she saw him already waiting, without his judicial robes. "Ms. Jackson," William stood and extended his hand. "Thank you for coming." Emma shook his hand firmly and sat down. "I must admit, I'm curious about this meeting, Judge Thompson." "Please, call me William," he said, surprising himself with the informality. "After you left my courtroom, I looked you up. I had no idea who you were or the important work you do." Emma's expression remained neutral. "And would it have made a difference if you had known?" The question caught William off guard. Would he have treated her differently if he had known about her credentials and reputation? The thought troubled him. "I'd like to think I would have at least listened to what you were trying to say," he answered honestly. "But the truth is, I don't know. And that bothers me deeply." Emma studied him for a moment, then her expression softened slightly. "Most people in your position would never question themselves this way." William sipped his tea to gather his thoughts. "The young man whose case you spoke up about, Jason Peters, I reviewed his file last night. His sentence was technically within guidelines, but compared to similar cases with defendants from different backgrounds, it was much harsher," Emma finished for him. "Jason made a mistake, yes. But 3 years for a first offense where no one was hurt. When white young men from wealthy families regularly get suspended sentences for the same crime?" William nodded slowly. "You're right. I've been thinking about patterns in my own rulings. I've always prided myself on being fair, but I'm beginning to wonder if what I thought was fairness was just following guidelines that are themselves unfair." For the first time, Emma smiled slightly. "That's quite an admission from a sitting judge." They talked for over an hour. Emma told him about her brother James, about how his wrongful conviction had destroyed his health and eventually his life. She explained the statistical disparities in sentencing and the human cost behind those numbers. As twilight fell outside the cafe window, William realized this conversation was changing something fundamental in him. For years, he had seen justice as something abstract and impartial. Emma was showing him that true justice required something more human, the courage to look beyond the system's boundaries. "I've taken enough of your time," William said finally. "But I hope this won't be our last conversation." Emma looked at him thoughtfully. That depends on what you plan to do with what we've discussed. I'm not sure yet, William admitted. But I know I can't go back to how things were before. The following week, William took an unusual step. He cancelled the £500 fine against Emma Jackson. This was just the beginning. He spent hours reviewing Jason Peters' case and 12 similar cases from the past year. He noticed a clear pattern: harsher sentences for young men from poorer neighborhoods, especially those with darker skin. William didn't sleep well that night. The numbers and faces swirled in his mind. He had always seen himself as a fair man. His father had been a factory worker, and William had worked hard to rise above his humble beginnings. Yet somehow, he had become part of a system that treated people differently based on where they came from or what they looked like. On Monday morning, William called Emma again. "I'd like to meet to discuss some findings," he said. "Would you be willing to come to my chambers this time?" To his relief, Emma agreed. When she arrived that afternoon, William had spread out case files across his desk. "Please, sit down," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I've been doing some research since we spoke." Emma set down her bag and took a seat, looking curiously at the files. "These are 13 cases from the past year," William explained. "All young men between 18 and 24, all first-time offenders, all nonviolent crimes." He slid a paper toward her. "These are their sentences." Emma studied the paper, her expression growing more troubled as she read. "The disparities are even worse than I thought." "Yes," William agreed quietly. "And I'm the judge who handed down these sentences." Emma looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. "What do you plan to do about it?" William took a deep breath. "First, I'm reviewing Jason Peters' sentence. I believe there are grounds to reduce it significantly." He paused. "But one case isn't enough. I need to understand more about the communities these young men come from, the challenges they face. I need to see what I've been missing." Emma considered this for a moment. "There's a community center in Brixton where I volunteer. We're having a town hall meeting this Thursday evening about police and court relations. Would you be willing to come, not as a judge, but as someone who wants to listen?" William felt a flutter of anxiety. He would be stepping far outside his comfort zone. Judges didn't typically attend community meetings in neighborhoods like Brixton. "I'll be there," he said before he could change his mind. Thursday evening found William parking his modest car on a side street in Brixton. He had dressed in casual clothes, jeans and a sweater, trying to blend in. Still, he felt nervous as he approached the community center, a worn brick building with bright murals on its walls. Inside, about 50 people had gathered. Some sat in folding chairs, others stood along the walls. Emma was near the front, speaking with an elderly woman. She spotted William and gave him a subtle nod. William took a seat in the back row. He hoped to observe quietly, but Emma had other plans. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce someone," she said once the meeting began. "William Thompson has joined us tonight. Some of you may know him as Judge Thompson, but tonight he's here to listen and learn." A tense silence fell over the room. Many faces turned to look at him with surprise, suspicion, or outright anger. William felt his mouth go dry. An older man stood up. "With all due respect, Ms. Jackson, why is he here? I lost my grandson to the system for 7 years because of judges like him." William felt a surge of shame, but Emma spoke calmly. "Mr. Reynolds, that's exactly why he needs to be here. Change won't happen if people like Judge Thompson don't hear our stories directly." For the next 2 hours, William listened as person after person shared their experiences with the justice system. A mother whose son was still in prison for possessing a small amount of cannabis. A young man who had been stopped and searched by police 17 times in 1 year. A teacher who described watching bright students lose hope after seeing their siblings and parents churn through the courts. William didn't speak until the end of the meeting. When he finally stood, his voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you for allowing me to be here tonight," he said. "I came thinking I understood justice, but I'm learning that there's much I don't know. I can't change the past or fix the entire system, but I can promise you this: I will do better. And I will bring what I've learned tonight back into my courtroom. As people filed out of the community center, many still regarded William with caution. But a few nodded to him, and Mr. Reynolds, the man who had questioned his presence, came over and shook his hand firmly. "Actions speak louder than words, Judge," he said. "We'll be watching." "As you should," William replied. "As you should." Outside, Emma waited for him by his car. "That took courage," she said. "Not nearly as much courage as it took for them to share their stories," William answered. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" Emma nodded. "Just the beginning." The E&D in the weeks that followed, William began making changes in his courtroom. He started asking more questions before sentencing. He looked deeper into each person's background, their support systems, and the circumstances that had led them to his courtroom. Many of his fellow judges noticed the shift. "You're getting soft, Thompson," remarked Judge Robert Harley during lunch in the judge's dining room. "I heard you gave community service to that shoplifter from Peckham last week. He should have gotten at least 6 months." William carefully set down his fork. "Did you know he's raising 3 younger siblings since their mother died of cancer? That he stole food because his benefits were delayed? Or that he's been working 2 jobs trying to keep his family together?" Judge Harley rolled his eyes. "We all have sad stories, William. That's not our problem. Our job is to uphold the law. Our job," William said quietly, "is justice. Sometimes those aren't the same thing." As he walked away from the table, William heard Judge Harley mutter something about that activist woman who had gotten to him. The comment stung, but William kept walking. He had been one of them for so long, comfortable in his authority, confident in his judgments. Now he was seeing cracks in the foundation he had built his career upon. That afternoon, William reduced Jason Peters' sentence from 3 years to 6 months with 2 years of probation. The young man's mother wept in the courtroom. William also quietly began a review of similar cases he had handled in recent years. Emma introduced William to other community leaders and families affected by harsh sentencing. Every Saturday, he volunteered at the Brixton Community Center, helping young people understand their legal rights. At first, the teenagers were suspicious of him. But gradually, they began to ask him questions about the law, about how courts worked, about what they should do if stopped by police. One Saturday, a boy named Marcus approached William after the session. He was 16, tall and skinny with intelligent eyes. "Judge Thompson," he said, his voice cracking slightly with adolescent uncertainty. "My brother got 3 years for something he didn't do. The public defender told him to plead guilty even though he wasn't. Said he'd get more time if he didn't." William felt a familiar heaviness in his chest. He had seen this scenario play out countless times. "When did this happen, Marcus?" "Last month." Judge Harley sentenced him. William nodded slowly. Judge Harley, the same colleague who had criticized him for going soft. "I can't promise anything, Marcus, but if you and your family are willing, I'd like to look into your brother's case." The boy's eyes lit up with hope. "For real? You'd do that?" "I can at least make sure everything was done properly," William said carefully. "Why don't you bring your parents to meet me next week?" As Marcus walked away, Emma approached. She had overheard their conversation. "Be careful, William," she warned. "Looking into another judge's cases, that's crossing a line in your world." William sighed. "I know. But if what Marcus says is true, then a young man is serving time for something he didn't do. How can I ignore that just to maintain professional courtesy?" Emma studied his face. "You've changed." "I hope so," William replied. The following Wednesday, William was called into the Chief Justice's office. Chief Justice Pemberton was a stern man in his 60s who had been on the bench for over 30 years. "Sit down, Thompson," he said, not looking up from the papers on his desk. "I've been hearing some concerning reports about your recent activities." William sat, his back straight. "Sir? Community meetings? Reviewing old cases? Questioning Harley's handling of the Wilson boys' plea deal?" Chief Justice Pemberton finally looked up, his expression severe. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" "My job, sir," William answered steadily. "To the best of my ability." "Your job is to maintain order and uphold the law, not stir up trouble or second-guess your colleagues." William took a deep breath. "With respect, sir, my job is to serve justice. Sometimes that means asking difficult questions, even of ourselves." The Chief Justice's face reddened. "This is about that woman, isn't it? Jackson? The one you fined for contempt before you started this crusade?" "Emma helped me see things I was missing," William acknowledged. "But this is about much more than one person. This is about making sure our system works for everyone, not just those who look like us or come from the same place as we do." Chief Justice Pemberton leaned back in his chair, studying William with narrowed eyes. "You're risking your career, Thompson. 20 years on the bench, a shot at the appeals court in a few years. All thrown away for what? Some misguided sense of social justice?" William stood up slowly. "If ensuring fair treatment for everyone who comes into my courtroom costs me my career, then perhaps it wasn't the right career for me after all." As he walked out of the Chief Justice's office, William felt strangely light. For the first time in years, he was truly following his conscience, regardless of the cost. The 6 months passed. The changes in William's courtroom attracted attention beyond the judicial circles. Local newspapers began writing about the fairness judge who was changing lives with his thoughtful approach to justice. More importantly, the community began to trust him. People who came before his bench no longer expected the worst. They knew they would be seen as human beings, not just case numbers. One rainy Tuesday, William received an unexpected letter. It was from Jason Peters, the young man whose case had started this journey. Jason was now working at a youth center, helping kids avoid the mistakes he had made. He thanked William for giving him a second chance and invited him to speak at a program for at-risk teens. William was moved to tears. He showed the letter to Emma when they met for their now regular coffee meetings. "This is why we do this work," Emma said, smiling warmly. "One life at a time." "We've made progress," William agreed. "But it's not enough to change just my courtroom. The system itself needs to change." Emma tilted her head, studying him. "What are you thinking?" "The annual judicial conference is next month. Every judge in the region will be there. I've been asked to speak about case management, but I'm thinking of talking about something else instead." Emma's eyes widened. "That's a big risk, William. Many of your colleagues already think you've gone too far." "Yes," he nodded. "But if I don't use my position to speak up, then what's the point of having it?" The day of the conference arrived. William stood backstage at the Grand Hotel ballroom, adjusting his tie nervously. The room was filled with over 200 judges, many of whom had been giving him cold looks all morning. Chief Justice Pemberton introduced him with obvious reluctance. "Next, we have Judge William Thompson speaking on judicial approaches." William walked to the podium, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. He set aside his prepared notes on case management. "Good morning," he began. 6 months ago, I fined a woman for speaking out in my courtroom. I silenced her because I could, because that's what I understood my role to be." The room was completely quiet. "What I failed to recognize," William continued, "was that I was helping a system that often silences those who need to be heard most." He shared the stories he had learned in Brixton, the patterns he had discovered in his own sentencing, the changes he had made, and the results: fewer repeat offenders, stronger community ties, and real justice being served. "Our job is not to keep order at the cost of justice," he concluded, his voice strong and clear. "Our job is to ensure justice, especially when it challenges the comfortable order we've maintained." When he finished, the silence was deafening. Then, from the back of the room, someone began to clap. William was surprised to see Judge Harley, of all people, standing and applauding. Slowly, others joined in. Afterward, a small group of judges gathered around William. Some were skeptical but curious. Others had questions about his methods. A few shared their own doubts about cases they had handled. You've given us something to think about, Thompson, Judge Harley admitted. I've been uncomfortable with some of my own rulings lately. Never thought I'd say that. Later that evening, William met Emma at a small restaurant near the hotel. She had been waiting to hear how his speech had gone. It went better than I expected, William told her. Several judges want to visit the community center. Judge Harley even asked about Marcus's brother's case. Emma smiled, her eyes bright with unshed tears. When I stood up in your courtroom that day, I never imagined this would be the result. Neither did I, William admitted. I thought I was punishing a disruptive person. Instead, I found a teacher. As they enjoyed their meal, William felt a deep sense of peace. His career might still be at risk, but he knew he was finally doing what he had always wanted to do when he became a judge, serving true justice. Outside the restaurant, as they prepared to say goodbye, Emma touched his arm gently. My brother James would have been 50 today. I think he would be proud of what's happening. William nodded, his throat tight with emotion. This is just the beginning, he said. Real change takes time and many voices. But we've started something important. Yes, Emma agreed. We've started something that matters. They walked together through the lamplit streets, a judge and an activist, once on opposite sides, now allies in the same vital cause, making justice truly just for everyone. The end.